All right. Welcome to the Career Research Lecture, which is primarily about the why, and the how of informational interviews. So I have a graphic here suggesting that your career is like a journey, and one of the key things about it is you don't know what lies up ahead. You might have some idea, but if you talk to people that have been there, odds are you can get there better and do more once you get there. Okay, so just a quick overview of what we mean by informational interview. It's a 20 to 30 minute conversation, ideally, where you're talking to the person who has the job that you'd like to have. And it should be somebody that has kind of the final job. So not somebody that's in grad school, somebody who's actually doing the job that you ultimately want to do. You're learning through interviewing. So you're trying to figure out what's going on by asking some questions that are open-ended and that give you a chance to get a feel for what the person is like and what their job's like. It's a developmental kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you're respectful of that person's time, and you make sure that they understand that. And you're not asking for a job. You're not asking for any resources per se. You're just asking for their time, and you're trying to make a connection with them. But this is a basic networking skill. So many people, when they're college students, they don't really have a professional persona, and you're not really comfortable interacting with people in a professional setting. And that's just normal. But you can start developing in that. You can kind of get ahead of the game by having this professional conversation with somebody that's in the field that you're interested in. Now, quick aside here, if you kind of have a good idea of what you think you might want to do, that's great. But if you don't, and you just got to kind of pick something at random, that still is going to do a lot for you, and still is going to build some confidence that gets you out there and kind of learning things. So I once had some good advice. One of my advisors said, it's okay to not know what you want to do, as long as you're doing things to figure that out. As long as you're taking the steps that are going to get you there.
An informational interview is an amazingly powerful tool. It can help you learn about different types of work you're interested in. And by providing inside perspective, it may even connect you to opportunities you couldn't see from the outside. So let's take a look at what informational interviewing is all about. An informational interview is not a job interview, and it's not a tricky play to get a job. If you're asking for a job and they do have one, then they'll likely start judging whether you're a good fit. And if they don't have one, then that conversation ends there. The key to a successful informational interview is curiosity. With sincere curiosity and good questions about your interviewee's life and experience, you gain insights into their successes and failures, how they got where they are, and what's important to them. Your curiosity will lead to an authentically engaged conversation, which also opens the door for the interviewee to get curious about you. The professional you're speaking with might say something like, wow, you're asking some really good questions. And in that transition, informational interviewing becomes even more valuable for someone looking for work. Informational interviews give you an opportunity to see what kinds of work resonate with you and help you determine what communities you would like to be a part of. In a good informational interview, the professional you speak with gets a lot out of the conversation too. They get to discuss their life and their work with someone who's curious about their experience and values their expertise. Plus, they get the pleasure of talking with someone who's genuinely interested in what they do. How do you do it well? Here are 5 tips to get you started. First, do your homework. Take some time to research LinkedIn or other online platforms to learn about the professional you're interviewing. Consider what questions you have about their life and work. The second tip is to try to meet in person. On the phone is okay, but face-to-face is best. 3, always try to buy the coffee or lunch. Your interviewee is giving you their time. Paying is a good way of showing your appreciation and beginning to create a connection. 4. Ask your interviewee who else they recommend you talk with. If the interview has gone well, they may be willing to connect you to other professionals you could learn from and who might have opportunities for you. Finally, tip number 5. After the interview, send a thank you. Email is okay, but a handwritten note is even better. And if they ask you to keep them posted on your progress, do so.
All right. So the informational interview is something we're going to have some projects designed around to kind of step you through the process. So the first one that's due is you need to identify the career that you're going to explore. Then the next step is finding those 2 contacts. And that's something you should start working on now because it's going to take a while for people to get back to you. Third, you're going to conduct at least 2 interviews. And then you're going to submit some reports on what you learned. The main thing there is you're going to want to kind of reflect on the experience and kind of think about your next steps. Okay, so some more things to help you kind of think about the informational interview. So if you've ever tried one of these puzzles where you try to get the chipmunk to the acorn, you might know that one of the best tricks is to start at the acorn and work your way back to the squirrel. That will lead you in a way that identifies a lot of options. That will make it easier to see where the paths go. There's something to be said for just starting from scratch, but if you can kind of come at it from both ends, that makes it work a lot better. So what you're doing here, this is a process you could call reverse engineering, where you take something that's already designed and you kind of take it apart to see how it works. You're also, in doing that informational interview, you're practicing some key skills, you're doing some confidence building, and you're building a sense of agency that you can go out there and kind of create your future. So those are all some things that I want you to think about as you're working on this. Okay, and then I did a graphic here to try to help you think through one of the key things is lots of times we have some idea in our head about the way something's going to go, and then you experience that and you're like, wow, that was not at all what I expected. And the reason it is, oftentimes, when something as complex as like a career, there's things about it that you don't know, right? So there's dimensions of the job that you hadn't even thought of because you didn't even know what questions to ask. So you want to think of this as a process where you're the redheaded person, and you might need to talk to the blue-headed person. And by talking to them, you're getting closer, but you're still not really to the ideal career. But you might have thought that this was the ideal career, but in talking to this person, you realize, oh no, I really want to do this thing over here. But the basic model here is you can't see around corners. So there's some questions you don't know to ask until you get there. But talking to people that have already been there is one way to get a jump on the game and make your progress go smoother and faster. Okay, so let me just summarize some of the key points here on what we're trying to do. We'll talk more about this later in the course, but there's this concept, begin with the end in mind. So don't just kind of futz around. Really think about where you want to be and then work backwards from there. You also want to take initiative. You want to think in terms of, as you're working on this, what's the next step? Okay, I've emailed these 5 people. When do I circle back if I haven't heard from them? Second, you're going to have to practice some project management skills, right? You're going to kind of be defining what you want to ask, thinking who you can ask, figuring out the logistics of getting there, having the interview, doing the follow-up, writing the reflection. It's a process, so you're going to kind of have to practice managing that whole thing. You're going to work on developing a professional persona, someone that speaks clearly, someone that can ask good questions, someone that nods when someone else is talking, all that kind of stuff. You're going to gather information and check the fit. We tend to have what's called a confirmatory bias. I think I might want to be a doctor, and so I think of reasons why I'd be a good doctor. and I'm not paying attention to the reasons why that's not a good fit for me. So you want to test some assumptions, identify those unknowns that you don't even know are there, get some pathway tips from some lessons learned from some big people that have already been there. And the other crucial thing is you want to learn how to stand out. Most of the times in life, the jobs that people want are good jobs, and there's multiple people that want them. So you got to kind of think about, how am I going to get myself noticed and get opportunities for myself that lets me go farther. Okay, so how do we get informational interviews? One, you got to have some confidence. But trust me, when you're asking people to talk about what they do and if they like doing it, that is not a hard ask. So most people, you'll be surprised how many people will say yes to doing an informational interview. Starting early is a good strategy. Using several strategies to identify potential people you want to talk to. It's like you're going out hunting for a rabbit. You don't want to just shoot one arrow. You got to shoot multiple arrows, and maybe one of them's going to hit. So you're going to work multiple leads at the same time. You're going to schedule your circle backs. So in other words, if you email somebody on Monday, I'd have in my calendar on Thursday to check back with them and say, hey, I emailed you. Maybe I'll, if you haven't had a chance, I'd really love to get a response and see if you'd be able to help me. And as you're working on this, we're going to talk about this later in the course too, but there's this concept of getting things done and the specific skills that entails. So there's a lot of little pieces here that you're going to have to get on top of. Okay, so just some more thoughts on finding leads. So this is from this is from Berkeley, actually, not Stanford, but also in California. But this is a nice diagram to kind of help you think of who you might know that might know somebody. So there's you, and then there's student organizations. Classmates have parents, and they know people. Neighbors know people. Maybe you have a neighbor that has a job that's somehow related to the hospital, and there's some career in the hospital that you think you might be interested in. They might know somebody. Your family, your friends, professors. But lots of folks, the way they approach this, they think about just a few of these. They think about family, or they think about professors, but they miss out on a lot of these other things. There's also community organizations. There's professional associations. If you're someone that's interested in working for a politician, I am sure that there are professional associations, say, of people that work in lobbying in D.C. or that have somehow are related to issues related to nursing or whatever legislative agendas a politician works on. But you could find good connections there. There's obviously social networking sites. Twitter has a lot of people with professional interests on it. There's community professionals you can reach out to. And this isn't listed here, but definitely something like LinkedIn is a huge resource. Okay, speaking of LinkedIn, I just went there and typed in Winthrop and therapist, and in no time I found 3 quick hits. Now, I'm not saying that all these would be the best people to talk to, but it's really easy to find some connections. So if I have that in my search term, I can just verify that I went to Winthrop as an undergraduate or a graduate and see what they're into. So this is a person that graduated, I think probably recently. They're working with autistic kids, it sounds like, doing some applied behaviorism. So that's a specific connection right there, and there's a lot of work to do in helping people with autism as that diagnosis is increasing. Here's someone else that has an MPA, Master's of Public Administration, and also a social work degree. They're doing victims advocacy stuff in the Attorney General's office. So if you have some interest in combining psychology with law, say, for example, or you're just poli-sci and you would like to do something with law, you can really quickly identify some people that you could reach out to. Then just one last one. Here's the therapist. You can see has an MSW and where she's working. So really quickly can identify some folks to reach out to. Okay, so again, some tips on how to do the interview. You want to be curious, be engaged, kind of prioritize your questions. I'm going to have you come up with a good list of questions, but you may only be able to ask a few of them, and that's okay. But kind of prioritize what you're most wanting to know about. One suggestion I would focus on, or one suggestion for you to think about is, check to make sure it's a job you'd like, but definitely ask for some tips to how to get that job. Like what kind of things you need to do to get into grad school, or what kind of things you need to do to get a good internship. As you're talking to the person, if you can authentically display some kind of gratitude and warmth, but you want to try to make a connection with this person, and make it a good experience for them too. Okay, a few more points. I just want to put this in a broader context, that this isn't necessarily something that's just professional and not related to the liberal arts or not related to higher ed. So there's this great book, it's called Orators and Philosophers, about the history of the liberal arts and the idea of a liberal education. And back in the day, so to speak, it was much less about getting a job and much more about becoming a full citizen and becoming a leader. So the kind of back in the day, the people that went to college were kind of the elites. And what they wanted to do is kind of figure out how they could stand out and be an orator, be someone that speaks in a way that compels people to listen and to be a leader. We've moved away from that, and we focus now, the PhD gets people very specialized, and PhDs tend to know a lot, but they tend to not focus on sharing the knowledge. It's more about generating the knowledge, and most of the reports and research they do is directed at other highly specialized people. So I think one of the consequences of that is our undergraduates these days, and this was true for me too, you don't really learn how to present yourself, how to engage in discourse, and how to come off as someone who asks intelligent questions and who would be a good colleague. So that's really a part of the history of the liberal arts that I'm hoping that you can think about as you're doing this. But the ability to learn about something on your own, to investigate it, to ask good questions, and to connect with people, these are really broad, general life skills that are something that you should strive for as an educated person. It's not just about getting a job. Okay, some resources I've lined up for you. These are in the resource folder in Schoology. But the Berkeley Career Center website has a lot of great resources. So Winthrop has a good career center and a good website, but there's no reason you can't go elsewhere and look at other institutions that may be a little bigger and have a little more resources. But they have a lot of great resources in line for informational interviewing. One of the things on the website, again, is identifying some benefits that you can get from the interview. And then this is a little bit more intellectual, but it's from the Harvard Business Review, but that's a journal that's really, it's kind of for the thoughtful, deep business person. So how to get the most out of an informational interview. This is an article that's free online. But one of the suggestions they're having is you really need to think like a journalist, like you're going to go in there and ask some good questions. And another way of thinking about it is you're pushing on some hypotheses. You come out, you kind of have an idea of how you think something works, but you're going to test it by interviewing somebody. All right, that's the end. I hope you have a great experience with doing the informational interviews. I'm here to help. Really encourage you to get started early and to figure out who you're going to talk to. And I hope you learn a lot. Okay, thank you.